Welcome to this World Satsanga on the 30th of May 2020, and I thank all of you for your questions and for your kind thoughts, and for those of you helping others in these interesting times, I thank you as well. It's very important that we keep our frequencies high, and in keeping our frequencies high we still maintain our spiritual awareness as well. We've got a very simple agenda this particular Satsanga. We're going to go through a quick talk about why aliens are not visible to us, and there's another part to this that I'm going to present as a whole lecture, rather than just having a lecture and questions and then meditation. We're going to have a long lecture in June which will go into some of the more localized aspects of the physical universe, such as questions upon how many major civilizations there are, what civilizations make up the Council of 12, who created the human body, etc. So I'm going to look at that in a bigger lecture context in June. So although there might be a couple of aspects where I'll drop into it in this particular talk, it's only going to be a short talk, and it's going to give us the opportunity to understand why, although aliens are on the planet right now, what we call aliens or other incarnate entities, we can't particularly see or detect them. Then we're going to go through a whole lot of questions. Now there's lots of questions, I'm going to go through them all. Some of them may be quite simple answers, but some of them might be long, of course. But I'm trying to go through all these questions so I can go into this longer talk in June. And then the end of my meditation was supposed to be to give unconditional forgiveness, but I've been asked to do one based upon how to create a condition in countries such as Africa, where the environment is arid, and where we can start to reduce the effect of things like famine and plagues, such as locusts destroying crops, and making the area more fertile, so it'll become more productive and be a better environment for those individuals who live there. Okay, so let's have a look at this talk, why aliens are not visible to us. Well, firstly, there's lots of conjecture that they are visible to us, but only visible to certain individuals, certain leadership powers, so to speak, around the world. And this isn't specifically true. There has been contact, specifically as a result of, shall we say, the typical vehicle going out of control and crashing on the Earth. That's quite clear. And there's been a number of different periods throughout the Earth's history where the individuals on board very mechanical craft have had problems and not being able to recover those issues, and the vehicle that they've been in has crashed, so to speak, and the survivors have been, shall we say, corralled and if not experimented on, have been questioned about certain technologies that are on board the craft. So there are physical aspects of aliens, of the lower frequencies, the first three frequencies where the human body is now, that have been in contact in very limited senses. I mean, bear in mind that all of these conditions where so-called governmental leaders have been in contact with other incarnate civilizations, or should we say their emissaries or their scouts, so to speak, have been the only people who communicated with them. There are of course lots of situations where people have been, let's use the word abducted, because that's what people like to hear. They haven't been abducted, they've been taken and shown what's been going on. And sometimes the abductions or the taking out of their natural environment has been used to monitor the body, because sometimes the body is used as a secondary incarnation by some of those souls who have a primary incarnation in another vehicle, another incarnate vehicle, which is part of the group of individuals who come to the Earth that we classify as aliens. So that can also happen. But by and large, though, most of the incarnate entities that we call aliens exist in higher frequencies, just a little bit higher frequency than where we are now, or at our frequency level, but shield themselves in an energy which creates an inability for the human eye and any other technology that we have, which is also based on the human eye, of course. Even X-rays are based upon the human eye, because although they operate at a higher level, same as infrared being higher than the the visual range of the human eye, and the ultraviolet being below the visual range of the human eye. Everything we do is based upon that very narrow range, this 400 to 700 nanometers of visible wavelength that we see. So anything that's above that is outside of the visual range. So a physical, even in the third frequency level, a physicality, whatever it is, it can be a house, a car, a plane, a craft of some sort that allows another incarnate entity to transport itself from one place to another within the galaxy, or those entities themselves would be outside of our detectability. So most of them are higher frequency. They're here and doing their everyday work, so to speak, but they're simply not visible because they're a higher frequency, or they're shielding themselves in some way by presenting a frequential barrier that puts them in a position where, although they're there and they're the same frequency level that we are as incarnate human beings, and on this particular third frequency level, they're still not visible because the barrier or the shield that they put around themselves is a higher frequency, and then anything that's within that shield isn't visible because we have to go past that higher frequency to see it. So in effect, what happens is we get the position where what we see isn't what's there. So although there are lots of different incarnate entities of different form factors, think of the number of body types we've got on the earth: animals, insects, birds, fish, the variations of the human body, and then you can start to think about, well, use that number of the different types, and you can extrapolate that into different types of incarnate human vehicle that there are in the rest of the physical universe. So we don't see them for physical reasons sometimes, frequential reasons sometimes. Also, there's another reason why we don't see them, in so much as we are being allowed to do our own thing. We are on the Earth, which is in a particularly, shall we say, hidden area within the physical universe. It's right at the edge of the physical universe, on top of that, it's right at the edge of a galaxy. Obviously, the galaxy we call the Milky Way, and so it's out of the way because what we are being allowed to do, as everybody knows from a metaphysical or a spiritual belief system or knowledge-based system, knows that we are in an experiment where we're being allowed individualized free will. So that's another reason why we're not seeing other entities, is because they're allowing us to do what we need to do without any interference. And that means that we have, it's a bit like, think of it in terms of time travel. If we go back into time and we affect time, then we affect the future, so to speak. It's not always the case, by the way, but that's a typical thought process that people go through. And so if there's a lot of interference from other entities, then it affects the natural way in which individualized free will happens. So if all of a sudden there was lots and lots and lots of spacecraft suddenly appear in the sky, and we had a confederation, for instance, of lots of different civilizations, and their representatives come here and say, look, you're just one planet within thousands who have got levels of technology and the ability to transplant themselves or transport themselves from one particular place to another, and we're here to help you, then it stops us from developing in our own right. There's lots of conjectures that we follow the same thing as Star Trek does, but Gene Roddenberry, when working with Phyllis Schlemmer, picked up a number of different things that is happening outside, and Gene Roddenberry, I called him Roddenberry, it's Roddenberry, sorry. He then took some of that information that Phyllis Schlemmer and Mary Bennett, who helped to compile the book that became The Only Planet of Choice, that was based upon Phyllis Schlemmer's channeled works in the group that Gene Roddenberry was part of, started to create a number of different things that Gene Roddenberry took away and created Star Trek from. And one of those was the law of non-interference, because free will only works if free will is allowed to dominate the situation. If any interference is given, then free will isn't happening, is it? It's a bit like if you have a child who constantly wants to put their hand in the fire. If you tell them not to, then you stop their free will. Their own free will allows them to investigate and gain knowledge based upon their own experimentation. Now, we know that if a child puts their hand in the fire, then they're going to burn themselves and hurt themselves. So we stop them. But what we've done is we've stopped their free will. We've stopped them from finding out for themselves that putting their hand in the fire is detrimental to them. And so we've steered them away from being able to think for themselves and act for themselves and behave correctly for themselves. We're telling them what to do. And that sometimes, as we know around the world, has a detrimental effect. So a lot of the entities, the incarnate entities that are the visible levels of frequency, or most of them are on the higher frequency levels, so that they can't be visible. And some of those are, of course, not incarnate and therefore purely energetic, and that's all part of this other presentation that I've done a long time ago. What are aliens, for instance? You go onto the website www.beyondthesource.org, look for events and lectures, and then you'll find that all the PDF files of those lectures there. One of them talks about the aliens as well, and you might find a video somewhere as well. Most of the videos that I've done in the past have always been under license of the either the publisher, in which case my publisher Ozark, or the event organizer, to allow them to broadcast them and obviously make a bit of money out of them. So most of them are not available freely for some time. But some of them you might find are available freely. If you go onto some of the websites that are out there, you might find that some of them have been copied by now. So have a look around, see what you can find. But from the PDF perspective, the lecture on who and what aliens are is there, so you can just download that for free, so you can get the written text, so to speak. But this free will thing is a major thing. Anything to do with changing our direction, and obviously we've had directions changed through us reverse engineering certain technologies that have come into our hands, like crashed craft and those sorts of things, or personal pieces of technology that some of these entities have had if their bodies have died in part of the crash, or they've been taken off them, for instance, are giving us clues about certain things. And if we can reverse engineer them, then that's not sort of removing our free will from us, because we're looking at it and we can do something about it, because we have the technology to work with it and reproduce it. But if we were told how to do something, that again is taking the free will away from us. So we're not actually doing it ourselves. So getting back again to this reason why we don't see aliens, one is to do with their frequential level, or whether they're incarnate or not. Two, it's to do with whether or not they're shielding themselves or providing some form of disharmonious frequency around them that means that we can't see them with our physical eyes or our detecting machines. And three, that we are annexed in a remote part of the galaxy, in a remote part of the universe, to allow ourselves to experience free will in every way. These other entities, by and large, are not having the ability to enjoy individualized free will. They will have certain levels of free will, but that free will be relevant to being in a collective condition. So they'll either be totally collective, such as like an insect hive, where each of the insects creates a function of the overall hive mind, so to speak. So there could be that extreme, or there could be the other extreme where they've got individualized free will, but they've also got program within them the need to consider what they're doing and to gain almost an authority, whether it's personal authority or higher authority, to enable them to do what they're doing, because to understand first, though, whether that individualized free will or that act that they're going to do is going to be a benefit to the collective or the general population of the civilization that they're part of. Okay, so by and large, we appear to be on our own in this universe because we're being left alone, because until we start to behave in a mature way where we understand our powers and our technologies and the way we should be responsible for each other in a loving and caring and fair way across the patch. Everybody has the same level of importance. Everybody has the same level of compensation, so to speak. Everybody's considered to be the same and equal, and we can work for the benefit of ourselves and the benefit of the environment. We won't see any other entities there, because we need to show that we're mature enough to be able to join properly a group of entities who are already thinking and behaving and acting that way. We need to show that we're in control of ourselves before we can be considered to be part of a group of entities who are already in control of themselves in terms of their thinking, behaving and acting with the powers or the tools or the toys, if you want to call it that they've got. Okay, well that's the lecture there. That's one of the reasons why we're not seeing these entities around us. And I've got a lot of questions here to go through, so we might have to be a bit patient as I go through these, because there's an awful lot. And I do make a few apologies for certain pieces of furniture that may or may not be squeaky. I do know that there are these things happening around us. This is it's the benefit of doing things in your own office, where it's not an anechoic system. It is very much a working environment, and unfortunately, when I have to move around to get comfortable again, it does squeak once in a while. It's actually quite a new chair, so I have to apologise for the manufacturer there. Okay, first couple of questions, or 3 or 4 questions, is from FN. And first one is, how could we collectively change our event space, such as possible famine, if on the horizon, or if it's on the horizon, or climate catastrophe? Native Indians, Aboriginals had a ceremonial dance to ask for rain, and then rain came. Is this fictional? If not, can one individual or a small group change events like the Indian Aboriginal did? What I'm picking up here is that there were certain shaman who understood how to change the etheric profile local to them, and that means when you change the etheric profile, you can move the energies associated with the etheric, which also makes the local atmosphere denser. And in doing that, you create a condition where you form clouds, and therefore rain can appear. So it's not a case of praying for it. It's a case of creating a condition, provided you understand how to use the tools. And there's also materials, certain specific materials that work together in certain geometric forms that can do the same thing. They can move the etheric around, compress the air, create clouds, and therefore create a weather system. So in the past, that information was available to us. But also, I'm also being told that some of the shaman were actually very good at understanding the seasons, and very good at understanding cloud formations and knowing when there's going to be rain or severe weather, whether it be drought or deluge, so to speak. So we can change that which is around us, but we all have to. There's another question later which I'll go into about the number of individuals who are required to create a change, which is the next question actually. But we can change things, but we have to collectively desire to change things. We can change things locally, and the immediate locality of our change is obviously within ourselves and those who interact with us. But in essence, the bigger change can happen provided we are all receptive to the message that's being given that allows us to make that change. Okay, so we can change event space. We've moved from one particularly good event space to a particularly random event space right now, where lots of things are happening around us that really shouldn't be happening. So we can also be collectively, shall we say, complacent, which allows somebody else to change your event space. So these things can happen, but we have to be in a big enough number to create the condition. Now, in the second question, it's Wendy Kennedy, who channels the Pleiadians, among others, says that only 144,000 people meditating together can change the event space, do things like heal the Earth. It seems like a small number considering we have 7.8 billion people on Earth. Is her assertion or statement correct? It's it's an example. In effect, 144 is 12 times 12. So forget the zeros on the end. It's a function of 12. So it's like a magic number. It works with the structure of the physical universe and the structure of the source and the structure of the origin. So it's got weight behind it. It's got energetic weight behind it as well. But when you look at things in terms of meditating, if we're meditating together concurrently, all thinking at the same thing at the same time, and nobody with their mind wandering, then we create a synergetic condition where it's not 144,000 individuals meditating together. It's the product of that 144,000, which is 144 times 144. So 144,000 times 144,000. I'll do a quick calculation on my calculator on my computer. And that's equivalent to 20,736 million individuals because of the synergetic effect. So in effect, that's something like 20 billion. So the answer to the question is yes, providing it's done properly. So that means that we'd all have to work together, that 144,000 would all have to be in total synchronization. No mind wandering, no thinking they can drop out to make a cup of coffee. The 10 minutes or an hour is when all of these individuals are all linked in together and all dedicated to doing the work. Then you can change an event space and heal the earth. So the answer is yes, but the conditions are strict. Okay. Next question. We currently have 7.8 billion people on earth. What percentage are backfill people? What percentage are shards? What percentage are aspects? Are there any mixtures in the mix that we're not aware of? If so, please clarify the name or kind of percentage. What percentage of this 7.8 billion can collectively change an event space through meditation? Well, we know the percentage of aspect because whatever 144,000 people as a percentage of 7.8 billion is that number. So without understanding finding out what a percentage of 144,000 is, it's quite a small percentage in real terms. So that figure of 144,000 as a percentage of 7.8 billion is a number of aspects that need to be need to be here to create a change. Okay, so let's have a look at the question again to make sure I'm understanding what I'm saying here. So we know that the percentage of individuals, of aspects that are required to make a change through meditation is the 144,000 as a percentage of 7.8 billion. Of the 7.8 billion, how many are real aspects? What I'm being shown now is that today and the aspects also include things like hybrid arm, by the way. So this is aspects that are created by the source. Okay, nothing else, just created by the source, and hybrid arm come into that as well. So I'm just looking at it. I'm looking at 56% of the world's population are full aspects, so to speak. What percentage of them are shards? I was just checking there because I'm surprised to see it's about 3%. So most of the individual. Now this is interesting because there's a lot of shards on the planet, and 3% of 7.8 billion is a lot. But on top of that, we have a rather large number of backfill people. And I was just checking again because I'm really quite surprised actually. So if we have 56% of people are real aspects, and then 3% of that 56%, or 3% of the 100%, sorry, are shards. And I'm being told the shards are in decline. Okay, so a shard is an entity, is an incarnate entity that's created through the division of sentience and energy from an aspect. So it's a smaller aspect of an aspect. An aspect is a smaller aspect of sentience and energy from a true energetic self, a TESS. Okay. A frighteningly large number of around 41%, I'm being told here, so that, well, it is 41%, is backfill people. And the backfill people are those individuals who are not human souls or human aspects or the same quality of TESS as those that we classify as being human, because they're in between the human and the animal, and they're those who are backfilling. They're allowing the rest of incarnate mankind to go to the next frequency level, to ascend to the next frequency level. And there's going to be a question of no doubt in the back of people's minds, well, I'm a spiritual person, why am I still here? Well, if you're a spiritual person, you're working in the light still, then you're here to help others. You will have elected to move on. You will find that it's individuals who are naturally high frequency or work on themselves to be high frequency, but don't have a desire to stay here, that will move on and move up the frequencies and ascend. Whereas those who are actively doing something will have subconsciously, or should we say agreed to, but we don't consciously understand, it's conscious from a human perspective, that we've agreed to stay here to help out. Okay, so it's a large number. It's 43% is backfill people and only 3% are shards. That surprised me, that has. I would have expected more shards, but I'm told not. I am being told, however, that some of the aspects that have been incarnate don't always have this 2.5% of sentience that you'd expect to have. So they could be classified in the shard level, but they're not. Okay, so very interesting thought process there. I might have to look at this again in a future Satsanga. Right, next question. You said that Yogananda was Om. Was Yogananda an aspect of your TESS or Om? What percentage of his sentience, 2.5 or 3.5%, how many lives and who was he in our history or past as we understand it? My understanding was he's not from my particular Om TESS. He was from a different Om TESS. And I'm being told they had about 2.7% of sentience, which isn't a lot when you consider that the others had much more than that. I'm just looking to see if that's what it is now, because sometimes I pick up things that are now rather than then. Now this is interesting, because what I'm being shown here is that the sentience came and went with Yogananda. It wasn't there all the time. There were times when it was what you would get from being in a human body, and there were times when it was increased to allow him to do certain things. So although there was a higher level of sentience there, as an average, his level of sentience was increased by his TESS to allow him to do what he needed to do at certain times. So that's an interesting consideration. I've never seen this before, where the sentience of an incarnate aspect is increased at moments of need, where that sentience needs to be increased to allow that individual incarnate soul to be able to do more than it would do if it was just having its normal level of sentience. So it moves around. It increased and decreased up to a minimum of around 2.7, but it was able to go up and down depending on what he was doing. And there are some observations from people that suggest that there was some quite miraculous stuff that Yogananda did as well. Lots of miraculous stuff apparently. So that's interesting to note that maybe those miraculous things included a temporary hike or increase in his sentience. Interesting. I'll need to understand whether that's happening with people like Jesus or the Buddha as well. Okay, right. Next question. We've got a group of questions here, so I need to go through quickly to be able to answer all these questions and go to meditation. This is from AB, just 2 questions. If the ultimate goal is to destroy the self, I think this is probably not quite understood. Okay, if the ultimate goal is to destroy the self, why is suicide penalised so heavily? Why such a severe punishment for similar ends? Well, we don't destroy the self. What we do is we remove the need to incarnate as a result of increasing our frequency, increasing our understanding, becoming self-aware over a period of incarnations, and giving ourselves an evolutionary level that means we don't need to incarnate. And if you think about it in terms of another way of consideration of how to destroy the self is going into communion with your test, and the test going into communion with source. So that would, if you like, also be one way of considering that we destroy the self. We don't destroy the self. We change the individuality back into collectivity. So that is the goal: is to experience individuality, to gain evolutionary level progression as an individual. That benefits the test, that benefits the source, that benefits the origin, because of the depth and the detail, the fine detail that can be achieved when a certain volume of sentience and energy is allowed to incarnate. It allows you to go into the real depth and detail of areas that the larger volume of sentience and energy couldn't get into. But in terms of the suicide part, it's because it's almost like defiling this honour to be able to be part of a piece of individualised sentience that allows us to go into the depths of experience. So it's not the same ends. One is reconnection with whom, what we are, and source in a collective way, in a totally absorbed way, because that's where we came from in the first place. Whereas the other one is removing the opportunity to create in a particular lifetime the opportunity to improve the accrual of evolutionary content to go towards that end of being in community with our test and source again. Okay, I hope that helps to answer the question, because it's different. There's a different thing. Suicide is not the same as going back into communion. But you don't destroy the self. You integrate the self back into what you really are. Okay. The Upanishads say that there is no actor, and that people who think that they are making decisions are acting are deluded. If this is so, and there really is no self-making decisions, how can anybody be charged with karma? Does that mean that we really do have a say in the outcome of things? Along with many of the old legends, myths, Upanishads, sayings of Jesus, etc., there was a level of understanding that couldn't be broadcast to the common people at a time, because they didn't have the education and didn't have the depth of knowledge to be able to understand certain concepts. So that the level of sort of shades of grey from black and white weren't there. So as a result of that, the descriptions were very, sometimes matter of fact, sometimes almost inaccurate, because the individuals who were being broadcast to wouldn't have been able to understand the detail or what was being given to them. It's a bit like trying to show and explain a computer to a caveman. It just wouldn't have worked. So what we do have is we have a help from our guides and helpers in going in certain directions, because we have a number of goals to experience within our incarnation. But how we achieve those goals is up to us, and that's the free will side. So the life plan is the goals. The individualized free will is our journey to experience each of those goals. In the meantime, because we're here in a low frequency, we can become addicted to it, or embroiled within it, or immersed in it too much. And this addiction to low frequency existence and the thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with it can and does create the condition where we accrue karma, because karma is basically us being stuck in low frequency existences, or wanting to be stuck in a low frequency existence, or the thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with them. So the Upanishads aren't aren't strictly accurate in today's understanding, although at the time they were probably as accurate as they could be. So that's what we have to think about, is that all of the old lessons were only as good as the education of the individuals who were broadcasting the lessons and the students who were going to receive those lessons. And so therefore what we see now, if they haven't been changed, is the errors, so to speak, in their detail that's backing up the information they were trying to portray, and the ability for the individuals to understand that detail. Because even now, some of the most uneducated individuals in the world are probably significantly more educated than those individuals who were classified as being highly educated when the Upanishads were being broadcast. And that's not to say that the individuals who broadcast the individuals were uneducated. They may well have been very highly educated, but they understood the limitations of what they were trying to give to those who couldn't understand. So they had to portray it or describe it in ways which couldn't be understood. Okay, so I hope that answers that particular question. Now we've got a bunch of questions from JM, and lots of them are usually around the books. Okay, and I think we've got about 15, 16 questions. So let's go through. I think some of them are one answer questions, so we can go through those as quite quickly. Right, so the first question from JM is from Source Entity 5. In fact, we have, in essence, already had our dialogue. It's just that the part of you that is on this plane of existence that you are aware of has not yet been able to recognise it as happening. And the comment is, I think I know this aspect of reality. Am I correct? Yeah, it's basically this part of me which is focused on this particular reality. If you think about everything happening concurrently, and as us having the capacity to experience everything concurrently, then everything has happened, will happen, should happen, could happen, may have happened, definitely didn't happen, definitely did happen, as already is happening now. It's just that we, in our low frequency existence here, don't have the capacity to experience all that concurrently. So in this instance, it's only when we focus on something in an individualized way that we then recognize it as being relevant or being part of our reality. So this is you'll see the questions in the PDF files when they get sent out, so you can read them and then relate them to the answers. But in real terms, everything that has happened will happen and could happen. In fact, this satsang has already happened and it's happening and will happen. It's just that I'm focusing on this particular aspect of its existence right now. So the answer is, I think you know this aspect of reality. Am I correct? I'm saying yes. Do you indeed know this aspect of reality? As you're right. It's almost like taking dictation rather than working at it. And the brackets are, this question doesn't feel right. Yeah, sometimes it's about, it feels like a conversation, and sometimes it feels like I've already been there. So sometimes it's like reading notes that I've already made, and maybe that answers the question. So sometimes I go into a question knowing I've already asked the question or knowing I've already got the answer, and all I'm doing is like say he's either dictating or typing up what I've already written down. So sometimes that's how it comes out. Yeah, that's a good question there. Excellent. Question 2 from Source Entity 5 again. In the wider environment we call the origin, every thought has the ability to lead to creation. Is this really the case? Does this mean that every thought, even my random thoughts, fantasies or daydreams, can lead to creation? And creation of what? Everything can lead to creation, provided there's the desire and the intention behind the thought. If it's a random thought, there needs for that random thought to go into action, then there needs to be, or creation as a result of the thought, then there needs to be the intention behind it. So the comment here is, every thought has the ability to lead to creation. That's certainly true for the origin, and it's certainly true for us, provided we've got the desire behind the intention that creates the thought. Once you've got those, then you have the action behind it, and then there is creation. Then there is creativity. Okay. Next question. In the discussion with Source Entity 5, you state, I am sure that physicists who read this text may like to disagree. And then I also state, it says here, I will welcome anyone to offer a mathematical space model on how this can or cannot be. Undoubtedly, the process of improving such explanation will expand mankind's understanding of this concept of reality. The glove of challenge is well and truly thrown on the ground, and the question from the question is: have any physicists contacted you to discuss this challenge? To discuss this or to challenge it? The answer is no. I keep getting I can't remember the guy's name there, but he's a Japanese-American guy. He's a well-known theoretical physicist. He's been on television quite a few times. And I keep getting the feeling that I'm going to be in contact with that gentleman at some time, because he's got the capacity to understand from an expanded perspective. And I'm fairly sure that when I start to do some work on understanding or the spiritual metaphysical understanding of theoretical physics, which is going to come out in some part of it is going to come out in the book on the Uncreated Creations, and also some of it will come out into the Beyond the Origin book, so which is after the book, by the way. So I think in those times when I sort of start being told to delve into it in some levels of detail, and shall we say more abstract thought that's going to create these individuals potential to sit up and think about it and say, well, this is interesting thought processes. Why is it coming from a spiritual perspective or metaphysical perspective rather than a hard science perspective? Then I might start to be contacted by these individuals as well. So right now there's no contact, there's no challenge, there's no discussion. But I see that there will be in the future. And the answer to the question is, how far in the future? Maybe 10 years or so. Next question from Source Entity 5. Your Source Entity has given you all, that is, the countless billions of you, that it has created the same level of opportunity that it had. How can this be? I have the same opportunity that our Source Entity has. My test has it. The same level of opportunity had is to be individually creative and to evolve individually, and that is the same opportunity that every individualized test and every individualized aspect and every individualized shard has. It's all to do with having the opportunity to have individualized free will and do what you want. That's what it means. Okay. Next question 5 from Source Entity 5 again. This is in Beyond the Source Book 1, by the way. I didn't say that, did I? No. So it's Beyond the Source Book 1. Whatever its ability, everything in creation is assisting the origin in its task of furthering its awareness of self. In itself, this ensures evolutionary opportunity for the origin, for even the origin needs to evolve. The part of this question is, why does the origin need to evolve? Since our need to evolve has to do with the rejoining of our creator, Source Entity 1. What is the end goal of the origin's evolution? The end goal of the origin's evolution is to allow itself to completely understand its current area of polyomniscient, polyomnipresent volume of sentient self-awareness within the first 12 levels of structure that we know about and that was broadcast in The Origin Speaks, to allow it to get into the next level. Evolution allows its sentience to grow, and as its sentience grows, it fills the gaps in between the structures. And so the structure that is part that it doesn't know about, or doesn't know in an intimate way, but understands is there, isn't part of this polyomniscient, polyomnipresent volume of sentient self-awareness. So it needs to understand, needs to be able to link these chunks of itself together. It's a bit like linking all the neurons in the brain together, so that they're all individualized neurons whilst also being one neuron together. So everything we do helps to fill in the gaps for our tests. Everything we do with our tests fills in the gaps for the source. Everything that source does fills in the gaps for the origin. So everything is done for the origin. It all fills in the gaps, creates a larger area of sentience, which is created through evolution. Okay. So as we evolve, sentience increases, we evolve. And that's what happens to the origin. So as we do it, it evolves as well. So the end goal of the origin is to know all of itself, not just a small part of itself, an infinitesimally small part of itself in comparison to what it really is. Okay, question 6 from Source Entity 5. So in the event that I create a condition that results in me totally losing control, which has happened, by the way, I return to full functionality when the life of the creation is over. Even in full loss of control, I am able to record that experience and memorize it. Total loss of control is an interesting thing to experience for a source entity. What happened when source entity 5 totally lost control? Or who or what was in control until it regained control? By that it meant its sentience fragmented into lots of little individualized units of sentience, but without direction or reason to be. And without direction or reason to be, sentience can just disappear. It can become inert. And so from the perspective of source entity 5, that's really what happened. It went into a case of complete randomness and irrationality, to the point where it wasn't actually creating anything or doing anything or becoming coherently self-aware or collectively together or create a condition where it was evolving. So from what I can remember of source entity 5, there was a reset function that it created, so that if it went out of control, it would reset and all of its sentience would gather together in a fully controlled and operational way to recreate the source entity 5 full sentient condition before it was put into the condition where it could go out of control. So it's a bit like if you've got a computer that's failed, you're having to sort of completely reload Windows or something, and then put all the operating software on there, the other apps on there as well. It's a bit like starting again, but it's or reverting the computer back to the factory settings. Think of it that way. But the factory settings are known. There's a certain point at which you can reset those factory settings too. So in the case of source entity 5, it was a complete random function and complete diffusion of its sentience that without direction or reason to be that created its condition of losing control. Has source entity 1 ever lost control? No, I know that. It's always had a plan. It's always had a way of doing things. It's always had a way of experiencing, learning, and evolving in both a free way, a free will way, and in a way that is governed to some extent. Okay. Question 8. From source entity 5, there is the possibility of meeting an alternative view in an alternative reality if you choose to work on 2 or more realities at the same time, which incidentally most of you already do. So the question is, is there an alternative Guy Needler or Joe Meebo in any reality? Is there any way for us to know whether we're part of the most that we are doing this? It seems dubious. We exist in multiple realities because we create them in a fractalized way through our choices. And there are realities where the Guy Needler didn't meet the Joe Meebo. There are realities where Guy Needler didn't meet Dolores Cannon. There are realities where he met Dolores Cannon at a different time or a future time. And all these different things. There's lots of different fractalizations of realities that we're part of. By and large, we don't have the capacity to be able to understand which particular reality that we're in. All we know is that we're in this particular reality. And that's fine. We should be working with this reality because that is the way that our tests parallel processes, so to speak. As we create alternative realities, or as we create alternative choices, and we go into that, and we choose those choices, we have different versions of ourselves fractalized out. Every entity, incarnate or disincarnate, does this, and that's how we parallel process. That's how evolution accelerates. So it is possible to meet an alternative version of us, but maybe we've got to be connected to that alternative. Maybe we've got to be a higher frequency so we can observe the connections between our true energetic selves in different realities and those projected aspects of its sentience in the varying different realities that are created through their individualized choices. So when we're at a higher frequency and we can operate in a higher level of connectivity, we start to be in the now, the multiple now, rather than the individualized singular now. Then we can start to see the alternative versions of ourselves as they exist. Okay. So, but there's not many of us who can see the multiple versions of ourselves. And although I have bumped into a couple of people who randomly and uncontrollably moved from one particular instance of an individual, young individual in India was doing it, and is still doing it, and he's going from a different set of realities now rather than the first set of realities he was going into. Do it sometimes to escape that particular reality that they're experiencing. This particular now version sometimes isn't liked, and so we go into different realities because we prefer to be in them. But in those instances, they don't see themselves in those realities, they just substitute themselves into those realities. Again, number 9, Source Entity 5. The origin is immensely pleased with the performance of all its creations and all that they have created or experienced to further their evolution, and therefore has no thoughts of changing what it has created in any way, shape or form. So since the origin is immensely pleased with the performance of all its creations, I am correct in concluding that the origin is immensely pleased with me. This seems preposterous. Well, you're doing what you're doing in your way, and that's the most important thing, is that irrespective of how you judge yourself, you shouldn't judge yourself, because everything that you do, even if you think of it as being minor, is actually a very important piece of experience and creates a level of evolution that the origin itself maybe wouldn't have the desire to have done. So you've made a choice that maybe the origin wouldn't have done. So if you think of it in those sort of terms, everything we do, even if we make a slight mistake, has an evolutionary consequence. That is, and that being we've experienced something. Whether we think that experience is optimal is a different kettle of fish. But at the end of the day, we've experienced something that we didn't expect to experience, and that creates the evolutionary opportunity. And that's why both Source and Origin are pleased with us, because we are experiencing different things. Okay, there's another part here, which I'm number 10. From the history of God, I had just gone through the frequency barrier and I see that leading up to the 100th level and into the massive stars that represent all the returning souls. How do physical stars represent all the returning souls? Okay. I assume this means souls returning to an earthly life, correct? Did a physical star represent me or you choosing to reincarnate on planet Earth? Just how are stars tied into returning souls? It's a way of saying things, it's not literal. If you look at the text, it says, see all of the souls, okay, I see leading up to the 100th level and into the massive stars that represent all the souls. The massive stars is basically an image that I could understand that shows the sentience and the energy, the spheres of sentience and energy, represented by stars of sentience, energy or light in the darkness, going back to return to Source, or their true energetic selves in this instance. So it's a figurative, it's a way of describing something. It's just a way of saying it rather than actuality. Okay. Question 11. In the history of God, Source Entity 1 tells you, don't forget that all biolife has been created by me and some of my helpers, the first souls that I created. We're all of us created by the helpers rather than by Source Entity 1 directly. Source Entity 1 created our true energetic selves. Okay, so think of it in terms of that. And then the life that's on the earth has been created by those entities that are disincarnate, who are part of the opportunity to biodiversify the earth, put all those things on the earth that would allow it to create certain conditions of environmental opulence or optimality, so to speak, to allow certain body types to proliferate and allow other souls to incarnate into them. So our source entity, our true energetic selves, were created by our source entity. Okay. The human form was created by certain projected aspects from our true energetic selves to create a vehicle that could be used to incarnate into a lower frequency environment, in this instance the Earth. And some of these vehicle types have been abandoned, or have evolved, or have been implanted from different similar environmental areas within the galaxy, to enable us to have the biodiversity, or should the frequential biodiversity, to allow those bodies to continue to operate in various different frequential levels. So basically, we're all created by the higher levels of ourselves, and the helpers were those entities who were allowed to be, or who showed significant enough evolutionary content to be able to allow the responsibility for the creation of a vehicle that could be used on this planet. Okay, right, question 12 from TC, from the curators. The Source Entity one is talking to me, saying, you are not in the evolutionary cycle, aren't you? Apparently not. I thought that's a fundamental part of being human. That's a fundamental part of being an aspect that we classify as being human. The human kind, shall we say, genre of tests. So the humankind genre of tests, and all of those tests that are incarnated in other vehicles around the physical universe, are in the evolutionary cycle, but the aren't. Even when they meddle, so to speak, or incarnate, they're not part of the evolutionary cycle. Okay. So question 13 in the again in the curators, talking to Source Entity one again. I seem to be struggling with this book, as am I. I can't connect with it like I do with the others. I'm working my way through it in the hopes that some things will settle in each time I read it. I suspect many readers can agree. Yes, the books have their time with individuals. Some people will fly through books, and some people will struggle through books, and some people will struggle through a book, put it down for a couple of years, come back to it, and then fly through it. The information is there for us when the right time is there. So if it's difficult to get through, that's because the information there isn't there for you right now. And that sort of element of not being there for you right now is basically because the understanding of other concepts isn't there to give you the platform to understand the concepts that are being portrayed or broadcast within the curators. I have the same thing. Information comes to me when the time is right. If the time is not right, it's like hitting a brick wall. So the thing is not to understand that it's too hard or not achievable. It's that right now that information isn't there for you. It may be that you leapfrog a book, and the Andialogues is okay for you, and the Curators is okay for you. But certainly in this instance with the Curators, I think in question 12 and 13, they're both from the Curators, not from the Origin Speaks, which I may have said. So if I did say the Origin Speaks, I forgive you. The Curators is a particularly difficult book right now, so don't worry about it. There's a lot of information there. Some people have enjoyed it, and some people have swanned through it, and some people have had to read it about 10 times. Don't worry, just go through it, treat it as a story, let things absorb themselves into you, and then maybe you'll get drawn back to it later. Don't worry. I understood it to be quite a difficult book as I was trailing the information as well. It's there for us to be expansive. If things weren't difficult for us, we wouldn't be expanding. If they weren't hard for us, we wouldn't be interested in them. If they were too easy, we'd be bored straight away. Question 14. When do you anticipate your book on the healing to become available? Right, well, it's been accepted by Ozark for publication, so I would guess that somewhere towards the end of 2020, around September, October 2020, is when it will be available. Okay. In question 15, in the Curators chapter, the Enders, Source Entity 1, when discussing nuclear warfare, says incarnate mankind will evolve mentally soon to the point where this technology can be put to a much better use, a much more benign use. What does soon mean? Soon means outside of actually my lifetime. I'm being told over 100 years. We're starting to understand more about how actually out of control we are with nuclear power. We think we're in control, but we're not. And the various different problems we've had with Fukushima and with Chernobyl are giving us understandings that we don't really know how to contain this level of power. We've got lots of big machines that show we've got the technology to create these different conditions, but actually making it very useful to us in a way which is more useful to us with individual small nuclear generators, rather than having big ones to create massive levels of electricity for cities, etc., even for countries. When we start to understand it from a different level, we can contain it in smaller amounts rather than big amounts, then we'll be much more mature. But it's going to be over 100 years before we can get there. I'm being shown there's going to be another, certainly 2, maybe 1 minor catastrophe before we start to understand how we need to respect this level of technology. Because right now we don't really respect it. We think we do, but we don't. Okay, question 16. In the Deliverers chapter of the Curators, Source Entity 1 says to you, it also gives theoretical physicists who are on the border of spiritualism in their better thinking a way marker, should they decide to delve into your work and the work of others like you. I'm unaware of that there are others like you whose work can be delved into. I do a lot of spiritual reading and I've encountered none like you. Are you aware of any, and can you point a finger to them or to their works? I'm reading Tom Campbell's My Big Toe trilogy, and his writing is interesting but not at all like yours, and not something for the spiritual seeker. So who are the others like you who are producing similar works? I'd like to know, thanks. Basically, they're not here yet. And that doesn't mean they're not in the planet yet. It means that the information that they're doing is not here yet. I'm aware that there are individuals who will take the work further, but they will be working in a stepping stone manner. So when my work is finished, which I am hoping will be within the next 6 years, in terms of writing books that I'm told to write, and there might be others, that will be done in a more relaxed way, rather than I must do this level of 12 books work. When that happens, then others will come along and take the work further. But they're not producing the work yet. They're on the planet, but they're not producing the work yet. So that's why you haven't seen them yet. Okay. But thank you for your observation. It's nice to know. And I do know the work of Tom Campbell, and I think he's got some really interesting ways of understanding things. And I think that people who understand the sort of the spiritual physics side of things, like this gentleman who is the Japanese theoretical physicist, and I'm going to disappear for a moment and try and find his name so I can tell you who he is, because I'm starting to feel a real affinity for this gentleman. Even the Chinese know about him, so that's interesting, isn't it? Michio Kaku, spelt Michio Kakku, and you can just see that he's got expansivity within him. He's a fantastic individual. I know he's bordering onto spiritual physics in that respect, and some of his books are really good. I've not read his books, but I've just seen some of his books on Google right now. I can see them, and the books are pretty good. So if you can look at those books from Michio Kaku, called Kakku, whichever way you want to say it, then he's got a book on the physics of the future, physics of the impossible, the future of the mind, the future of humanity, and one called Hyperspace. Then it's one of his earliest books, actually, Hyperspace. It's worthwhile looking at. I only hope he lasts long enough or lives long enough for me to be able to get in contact with him at some point. I have a feeling that I will get in contact with him at some point, and it's going to be as a result of these next 2 books I'm writing now. To be very interesting to get hold of this guy. He's good, and he's going to provide an important stepping stone on the bridge between physics, hard physics, theoretical physics, and metaphysics, and science and spiritual physics. Okay, good. Thank you. Well, thank you, JM, sending those questions out. Always excellent questions, and I'm really pleased you asked the questions, because all of the answers to these questions, by the way, are channeled on the spot. So it's not as if I've read them first and then go into them and give a polished answer. The information is channeled on the spot, or I already know the answers because I'm familiar with the material here. I have to say that because the work is channeled, it doesn't always stick in my head. So when somebody asks me a question about a book that I've written or channeled 5 or 6 years ago, that's done and dusted. It's gone. Even the last book, the information in the curators is gone, because I've worked on the healing book and I'm now working on another book. So I have the unfortunate problem of when people ask me questions about the books, I have to channel the information for the answers. And sometimes I actually go into the books and read that chapter that they're talking about myself and think, wow, that was an interesting piece of information. Where did that come from? It certainly wasn't me. Okay, next couple of questions, and we can go to meditation, is from WP. How many universes formed? Start again. Totally misread that. How were the universes formed, and did our Tesses come before and have a role in it, or did they come afterwards? Was it happenstance? Was it solely the work of the origin, the source entities? The true energetic selves, the creation of the planet Earth, for example, is completely improbable without assuming some supernatural intervention. Right. The multiverse and the universes within it were created by the origin in its first desire to create an environment, or should we say a structure where itself could be analysed by the creation of smaller units of itself, and therefore go into the minute detail. So everything was created by Source. Some of the modifications have been done by the true energetic selves, or the smaller individualizations of Source at a later date. So there's some modifications created by some of the true energetic selves that were created by Source, and some of the other modifications, minute detail modifications, were done by some of the projected aspects of some of those tests as well. And some of those aspects of those tests created the physical bodies. So that there wasn't created by, although there has been some levels of Darwinian evolution, because some of the bodies that we have today were created in times of higher frequency, and although other human form bodies have been introduced to cope with lower frequencies, because it was anticipated that those higher frequency human forms wouldn't be able to survive the drop in frequencies, some of them did. So we've got a mixture on the Earth of physical bodies that were originally created by some of those aspects projected from the Tesses that were part of, or helping towards, create a condition where we could accelerate evolution through individualized free will, and other parts of the physical universe as well, and also the Tesses themselves. So there are minor changes done by the aspects, bigger changes done by Tess, but initially everything in the multiverse was created by the source entity. The minute detail, of course, done by Tess and done by the aspects as well. So and of course there's natural evolution there. So we have reintroduction to the human body of different frequential levels, it's gradually getting lower frequency, but some of those previously introduced physical forms or human bodies, some of them did in fact adapt as a result of Darwinian evolution to the lower frequencies, and that's why we've got the diversity of human form now. Not specifically as a result of their location geographically on the planet Earth. Okay. Right, so what we're going to do now is to thank those people for the questions. So I thank WP, JM, AB and FN for all those questions. Lots of questions there, thank you very much. All deep searching questions and all relevant to ask, and of course all very important for those people who maybe thought of the questions but didn't feel the desire to ask them as well. So let's look at the meditation now, which is basically a way of creating a change in an environment that allows places like Africa to become more verdant, to reduce the number of catastrophes in terms of the advent of plagues of locusts taking over and basically eating up all of the crops that are there, and creating the opportunity for a better environment, like changing desert into a verdant society, a verdant area or environment. So as a collective meditation, just calm down, sit your back upright, straight, upright at 90 degrees. If you have a straight backed chair, that's perfect. Feet flat on the ground, back straight, hands palm uppermost on your upper thighs. Head aligned straight with your spine, so your neck is straight with the spine. Closed eyes, gently focused on the origin of the third eye, in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And just visualize. If you can't visualize, use mentally spoken words to create the essence of the visualization. For instance, if you want to see a desert, say, there is a desert in front of me. If you want to see an oasis, or visualize an oasis, you say, within the desert there is an oasis. So these mentally spoken words can create the same impact as the vision. Okay? So if I say visualize, you can use the mentally spoken words to create the same thing. So rather than just saying Africa, we can say that we can use this globally. So when we think of a location, think of all locations where there are pockets of humanity, incarnate human beings, where the earth is arid. Visualize that the ether in the area, now this can be pockets of ether, can be circles of ether. Think of a circle of ether. You can think of ether as like a cloud-like, or a candy floss-like, or a cotton wool type of effect. But think of it being like a donut around the area that you're trying to create the change in the environment in. Think of it as a huge donut at first. Very thin but huge donut. The diameter of which is hundreds and hundreds of miles. Maybe even thousands of miles. To encompass a whole continent, like the South African continent. Now see this large donut of cotton wool, of which the internal diameter is only a few miles short of the external diameter, becoming smaller. So the internal diameter and the external diameter become smaller diameters. So rather than being an internal diameter of, say, 200 miles and the external diameter of being, say, 250 miles, it comes down to 200 miles as an external diameter and 150 miles as an internal diameter. The gap in the middle, the hole in the middle, is where there is air, just plain atmosphere. But because we've made this donut smaller, it compresses the air inside. The compression of the air creates clouds as you make this donut smaller. Make it smaller, that compresses the clouds smaller and smaller, denser and denser, and in compressing the clouds you create the opportunity for the clouds to change from air to compressed air or condensed air into water. So visualize this, the creation of water to irrigate an area. Give this area, this donut area, a command so that it, every evening or every night, it goes into a smaller diameter to compress the air to create rain. And it rains for a couple of hours and then returns back to its previous diameter, so that the compression is reduced and the clouds dissipate, and as the clouds dissipate the rain stops. So you can create a condition, you can program it, tell it to happen every day. Now visualize or use your mentally spoken words that in this irrigated area, seedlings or the people have desire, who live in the area, have the desire to plant trees or crops. These trees or crops stop the sand or the earth from moving around, give it rigidity, solidity, firmament, so that the plants can grow, trees can grow, leaves can fall and create further fertilizer for the ground, change in the earth, composure and structure. So visualize that again. Know it's going to happen. Know that your thoughts, your visualizations, your mentally spoken words are creating this condition. See the cycles, the yearly cycles of growth and decay, growth and decay, growth and decay, with the continuous daily irrigation, the expansion and contraction, expansion, contraction of this donut of ether, compressing the air, making clouds, further compressing the air, making it denser, making rain, and then becoming a larger diameter, expanding and decompressing the air. We don't want to flood the area, we just want to keep it irrigated so that it can become fertile. And now with the crops, create an energy around the crop, an energy of invisibility, so that insects that are undesirable don't sense or see those crops. So even though they come into the area, they pass overhead and bypass the crops. Other insects, you can change this shield, this defense, this barrier, that are beneficial, like bees, butterflies, and other insects that are creating a positive effect on the flora that is in the area that you've created, the crops that are in the area that you've created. They help with the germination of, the pollination of these crops. Are not affected. They become part of the new environment. So insects that are detrimental don't sense, see, smell, taste or touch these areas because they don't detect it, and those that are beneficial become part of the ecostructure. with all these things I've given you to do, create this condition, knowing that all areas of the earth that are arid, or being made arid by mankind, should you decide to do so, create a focus will also benefit from your desire in changing their environment. We'll just stay here to let you construct your visualizations and your mentally stated intentions that create the visualization, that create the change in reality, the change in event space. To change these desert areas, these arid areas, these poor environments into lush, verdant, productive, self-perpetuating and growing environments. Okay, so slowly come back into yourselves, having seen what you've done, experienced what you've done, visualized what you've done, stated what should be done in terms of creating this new verdant environment in the most arid areas of the earth. If you need to take a drink of water, do so to help ground you. And for those of you who are using this meditation with a group of individuals, you can not limit it to the 5 or so minutes that I've done the silent part for. You can make it as long as you like, and do it on a regular basis as well. The more you do it, and the more people you involve, and the more groups you involve, the more synergy you get, and the more power is behind it, and the more chance of this becoming a regular reality also comes into it as well. So thank you very much for your time and your patience and your meditation today, and your light work. Before we go, and the next Satsanga will be in June, of course, towards the end of June. I'm just checking the diary. It's going to be on the 27th of June. I can accept questions, but I'm going to do questions in July instead, because I'm going to use the whole of the, other than the meditation side, the whole of the June Satsanga to answer the question about the other galactic civilizations and the Council of 12 and how it's all created and everything else. Because I've been asked that question a lot by a number of individuals, so we need to have a look at it and see how it correlates with other people's channeled works, I guess. You can also look at bigpicturequestions.com, which is one of the ladies who also transcribes this information and broadcasts the transcriptions and the audios as well. And you can contact Ulla or Faith through this, because I know Faith is doing a lot of meditation based upon the Satsanga meditations. So if you want to join her group, I think you can do through the contact me part of the bigpicturequestions.com website as well. I think that Ulla and Faith are now working together. So thank you very much. Thank you to Ulla and Faith for doing their work, and I look forward to working with you again in June and going through this focus on the physical universe, and probably even this particular galaxy. And do look after yourselves. Do keep practicing the chakra opening exercises. You can get them free off my website. Go into the About tab, and then the Press Pack, and then go and look into the free downloads there. There's the 2 documents. There's a PDF file, and there's an audio on Open the Chakras. And also, don't forget, in the correspondence course tab, the Psychic Shield is being sold there for £1. I'll probably extend it into July actually, because you can use the Psychic Shield to help raise your frequencies and protect you as well from the effects of this virus, although you should still follow the physical directives of your local government as well. Okay, that's it for this month, May Satsanga. Namaste. God bless you all, and please look after yourself and look after others and be of service to others as well. Namaste. Did you see the aliens in Crete?